Jessica, a caring and experienced daycare caregiver, always pays extra attention to the children's situations. Just because she was worried about the strange behavior of a little girl when her father came to pick her up, she decided to follow them. This seemingly ordinary decision plunged her into an unexpected turmoil. Hi everyone, welcome to Story Hideaway. Let's get started. Jessica Lane, a 27-year-old caregiver with several years of experience at Sprout Daycare in Tacoma, Washington, was well acquainted with the rhythm of the afternoon pickup routine. As the clock on the colorful daycare wall struck 5:45 p.m., signaling the end of the day, parents began to stream in to collect their children. Jessica, while checking the new daycare app notifications on her phone, saw that Emily Carter was next on the list for pickup, and her mother was already on her way. Making her way to the bustling playground area, filled with the laughter and excited chatter of children, Jessica called out to Emily, who was giggling with her friends at the slide. "Emily, it's time to get ready, darling. Your mom will be here any moment to pick you up," she said gently. However, the change in Emily's demeanor was instantaneous and alarming. The smile vanished from her face, replaced by a look of distress. "No," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't want to go home. Please, I want to stay here." Jessica crouched down to Emily's level, trying to soothe her. "I know you're having fun with your friends, Emily, and that's wonderful. But it's time to go home now. You'll be back tomorrow to play again." But Emily was not consoled. Her distress escalated into a full-blown tantrum, tears streaming down her cheeks as she repeatedly shouted, "No, no, no. Please, I don't want to go home." The girl backed up against the wall beneath the slide platform, making it difficult for Jessica to reach her. Jessica, accustomed to dealing with children's tantrums during drop-off and pickup, sensed that this was different. There was a fear in Emily's eyes that she hadn't seen before. Before she could further console Emily, the doorbell rang, indicating the arrival of a parent. Assuming it was Emily's mother, Jessica said, "Listen, Emily. I think your mommy is here. Let's go to the door together, okay?" But Emily vigorously shook her head, refusing to budge. Jessica then made a deal with Emily, allowing her to play for 5 more minutes while she went to check with the parent at the front desk. As she made her way to the front reception area, she expected to see Emily's mother but was surprised to find a man standing there. It was Mark Carter, Emily's father. Jessica, following the daycare security protocol, informed Mark that Emily was supposed to be picked up by her mother and that they could only release children to registered guardians after scanning their barcodes. Mark explained that his wife had an important thing to do at home and that he had brought her phone. Jessica hesitantly accepted the phone and scanned the barcode, which matched Emily's mother's credentials. Remembering Mark from a parent greeting event nearly a year ago, Jessica's tone warmed slightly. She even offered to register Mark as a guardian in the system for future pickups. As she guided Mark through the process, she couldn't help but notice a slight tension in his demeanor, though she initially chalked it up to the stress of a new routine. With the administrative tasks completed, they walked towards the playroom where Emily was waiting. When Mark called out to his daughter, Emily visibly shuddered and backed against the wall, refusing to come down from the slide. Despite Mark's attempts to coax her gently, Emily's fear was palpable. Jessica watched as Emily reluctantly extended her hand, her face etched with an expression of fear. As they prepared to leave, Emily bolted back towards the playroom, and Mark had to scoop her up. Jessica, while helping Emily with her shoes, couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. There was more to Emily's behavior than just a typical childhood tantrum. But without any solid evidence, she had no clear reason to intervene. As Mark carried Emily out of the daycare, Jessica was left with an uneasy feeling in her stomach. After Mark and Emily left the daycare, Jessica was still troubled by Emily's strange behavior. Just then, another staff member handed her Emily's well-loved stuffed animal, saying the girl must have forgotten it in her rush. Jessica immediately decided to follow them, driven not only by the desire to return the toy but also by her growing suspicion. She quickly got into her car and started trailing Mark's red vehicle. As she drove, Jessica called the daycare to inform them that she was leaving to return a child's item. The traffic was light, but Mark seemed to be in a hurry, speeding well above the limit. Jessica tried to keep up, but she was also cautious not to break the speed law herself. As they drove, The scenery changed from the bustling city to more residential areas and then towards the outskirts of Tacoma. The city gradually gave way to forested regions, and houses became more spread out. Jessica, who usually admired the beauty of this semi-rural area, now felt a sense of foreboding. Suddenly, Mark's car swerved off the main road onto a narrow, unpaved street that disappeared into a thick section of the forest. He stopped the car abruptly on the edge of the asphalt. Jessica's heart leaped into her throat. She slowed down and parked her car behind Mark's, partially hidden by the dense undergrowth. She got out of the car, holding the stuffed animal, and called out, "Mr. Carter, Emily." Mark turned around, his face showing a mix of shock and anger. "Have you been following us this entire time? What are you doing here?" he demanded. Jessica held up the stuffed animal and replied, "I'm so sorry to intrude, Mr. Carter." Emily forgot her stuffed animal at the daycare. "I thought she might want it back, so I followed to return it." Emily's eyes lit up at the sight of her toy, but she still clung tightly to her father's leg. Mark's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "You followed us all this way just to return a toy? That seems a bit excessive, don't you think?" Jessica blushed and explained, "I know how important these comfort objects can be for children. I thought Emily might be really upset without it." Mark's expression softened a bit, but there was still an edge to his voice. "Well, I suppose that's thoughtful of you, but it wasn't necessary. She would have been fine without it for one night." Jessica then asked, "I'm sorry, but may I ask what you're doing out here in the forest with Emily? It's getting quite late." Mark seemed taken aback by the question. He stammered for a moment before saying, "Well, you see, Emily needed to use the bathroom urgently. She drank a lot in the car after all that crying and playing at the daycare." Jessica was skeptical. She knew that all the children had used the bathroom after class as per routine, and Emily didn't show any signs of needing to relieve herself now. But she didn't want to push too hard. Mark then told Jessica it was best for her to leave as Emily needed privacy. Jessica reluctantly got back into her car, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. She watched as Mark and Emily walked deeper into the forest, Emily clutching her stuffed animal tightly. After a while, Jessica decided to drive to a nearby gas station. She thought she could use the time to gather her thoughts and decide what to do next. At the gas station, she parked her car in a spot where she could still keep an eye on the dirt path leading into the forest. She also took the opportunity to look up the Carter family's information on the daycare's cloud drive and search for them on social media. What she found only deepened her concern. There were few pictures of Emily looking happy, and her mother was conspicuously absent from most of the photos. Just as she was about to leave the gas station, she saw Mark's red car speed past. Without hesitation, she got back into her car and started following it again, using the GPS on her phone to navigate to the Carter's home address that she had looked up. She was determined to find out what was going on and make sure Emily was safe. Jessica drove towards the Carter's home, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. The residential area where they lived was quiet, with houses spaced apart and surrounded by patches of forest. As she neared the address she had noted down, she spotted Mark's red car parked outside a white, painted house. She parked her car a few houses away, trying to be as unobtrusive as possible. The evening was settling in, and a soft, cool breeze was blowing. Jessica lowered her car window slightly, allowing the fresh air to filter in. She sat there, waiting and watching the house, her heart pounding in her chest. The quietness of the street was almost eerie, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Suddenly, a sharp sound of breaking glass pierced the stillness. Jessica froze, her eyes darting towards the Carter's house. She strained her ears, trying to hear more. Then, she heard a woman's voice, filled with fear and desperation. "Stop, please. Not in front of our daughter." Jessica's blood ran cold. Without thinking, she reached for her phone and opened the camera app, preparing to record whatever might unfold. She saw a figure, presumably Mark, move quickly to close the curtains. Despite the curtains being drawn, faint sounds of a woman's muffled whimpers and a man's angry, low, pitched voice seeped through the walls. Jessica's hands trembled as she pressed the record button. Then, through the curtains, she saw the shadow of someone lifting a baseball bat. The sight made her sick to her stomach.
It all made sense now.
Emily's reluctance to leave the daycare, her cryptic remarks about home, and Mark's strange behavior. Jessica was certain that she had stumbled upon a domestic violence situation. She knew she had to act quickly. With shaking hands, she ended the recording and dialed 911.
911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's calm voice came through the line.
I need to report a possible domestic violence incident, Jessica blurted out, her voice shaky. I'm parked outside a house.
I can hear a woman screaming inside.
I think she's in danger. The dispatcher asked for the address, and Jessica quickly provided it. Please hurry. There's a child in the house too, she added. Officers are on their way. Can you tell me your name and if you're safe where you are? The dispatcher inquired.
My name is Jessica Lane.
I'm in my car, parked down the street. I don't think they know I'm here, Jessica replied. The dispatcher told her to stay in the car and keep safe. As Jessica was about to answer, she saw the front door of the house open.
Mark stepped out alone.
His movements were jerky, and he looked extremely angry. He's coming out of the house, Jessica whispered into the phone. He's alone, and he looks really angry. As Mark walked towards his car, Jessica noticed a scratch on his arm. There's a scratch on his arm. He's trying to cover it with his sleeve, but I can see it, she informed the dispatcher. Just as Mark was about to get into his car, the sound of sirens filled the air. 2 police cars rounded the corner, their lights flashing brightly. They screeched to a halt in front of the house, and 4 officers emerged, their weapons drawn. Police!
Stay where you are.
Hands in the air! One of the officers shouted. Mark froze, his hand still on the car door handle. Slowly, he raised his hands, his face a mask of shock and fury. Jessica's attention was then drawn to one of the house's windows. She saw Emily's small face peering out, her eyes wide with fear as she clutched her stuffed animal. The child. I can see her in the window. She looks scared, but I don't think she's hurt, Jessica said into the phone. The dispatcher assured her that the officers would ensure Emily's safety. Jessica watched as the officers approached Mark. She saw one of Mark's hands twitch, as if he was about to reach inside the car. The police reacted immediately. Don't move. Keep your hands where we can see them, an officer barked. Mark's hand stopped, and he slowly raised both hands above his head again. The officers quickly closed in on Mark, securing him and starting to search his person and the car. One officer patted him down, while another shone a flashlight inside the vehicle. The officer frisking Mark reached into his pocket and pulled out a house key. He held it up, exchanged a knowing look with his partner, and passed it to another officer who headed straight for the front door of the house. As Jessica continued to watch, she knew that her actions might have saved Emily and her mother from a potentially dangerous situation. She waited anxiously, hoping that everything would turn out okay. Jessica remained in her car, her eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. The police officers, with their weapons drawn, had Mark surrounded. One of the officers frisked Mark while another shone a flashlight into the car's interior. As they searched, an officer found a large, heavy hammer wedged between the driver's seat and the center console. Got a weapon here, the officer called out, holding the hammer up for his colleagues to see. Jessica gasped at the sight from her vantage point. The discovery of the hammer further confirmed her worst fears about Mark's violent intentions. Mark's face was a mask of fury as he glared at the officers and, for a brief moment, at Jessica. Inside the house, another officer was making his way to the bathroom where Emily had said her mother was locked. The officer called out, "Police! Is anyone in here?" His voice echoed through the dimly lit house. After a moment, a weak response came from behind the bathroom door. The officer carefully used the key retrieved from Mark to unlock the door. When the door opened, Malene Carter emerged, her face bruised and swollen, her body visibly shaking. She looked disheveled and in a state of shock. Emily, seeing her mother, immediately broke free from Jessica's side and ran towards Malene. The two embraced tightly, both sobbing. Jessica, meanwhile, was approached by an officer. We need to take your statement. Can you tell us exactly what led you to be here?" he asked. Jessica took a deep breath and recounted the events from the daycare. She described Emily's unusual behavior during pickup, her own decision to follow Mark's car, and the disturbing things she had witnessed and heard outside the house. As she spoke, Jessica could see the officer's expression growing more serious. He nodded occasionally, jotting down notes. "Thank you, Miss Lane. Your actions might have saved 2 lives tonight. Your quick thinking and courage are commendable," he said. Emily, still in her mother's arms, looked up at Jessica. "Miss Jessica, I'm sorry I didn't tell you before. Daddy said he would hurt me if I did," she sobbed. Jessica's heart ached for the little girl. "It's okay, Emily. You're safe now, and you were very brave," she replied softly. Malene, her voice hoarse from crying, began to share her story. Mark changed after he lost his job at the tech company. He started drinking and became very controlling. He blamed me for everything that went wrong in his life. The abuse started small, just verbal at first, but then it turned physical. I was too scared to leave, especially for Emily's sake. The paramedics arrived on the scene and carefully examined Malene and Emily. They checked for any serious injuries and provided immediate first aid. Jessica watched as they worked, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that help had finally arrived for the mother-daughter duo, and sadness at the realization of the pain they had endured. Mark, still handcuffed, was being led towards one of the police cars. He continued to shout obscenities, threatening Jessica and the daycare. "You'll pay for this. That daycare won't stay open for long," he raged. But his threats fell on deaf ears as the officers firmly put him in the car. The officer who had been taking Jessica's statement turned to her again. "We'll need you to come down to the station to formalize this statement and provide us with that recording you mentioned. Are you okay to do that?" he asked. Jessica nodded. "Yes, of course. I want to do everything I can to help," she replied. As the police cars and the ambulance prepared to leave, Jessica looked at the Carter house one last time.
The once peaceful-looking home now held the dark secrets of a troubled family.
She knew that the road ahead for Malene and Emily would be long and difficult, but she was determined to support them in any way she could. She had become a part of their lives in a way she never expected, and she was committed to seeing them through this difficult time. Jessica followed the police cars to the station, her mind still reeling from the events of the evening. At the station, she was led to a small room where she gave a detailed and formal statement. She handed over the recording she had made, which clearly captured the sounds of distress from inside the Carter's house. The police thanked her sincerely for her evidence, emphasizing how crucial it was for their investigation. Malene and Emily were also at the station. Malene, despite her injuries, was strong-willed as she recounted the long-term abuse she had endured from Mark. She explained how his behavior had gradually deteriorated over the years, especially after he faced setbacks at work. Emily sat quietly next to her mother, holding her hand tightly. The little girl seemed exhausted but also relieved that the truth was finally out. After giving their statements, Malene and Emily were provided with support services. The police connected them with a domestic violence shelter where they could stay for the time being. Social workers were assigned to help them through the difficult process of rebuilding their lives. Jessica, who had formed a bond with Emily during their time at the daycare, offered her support as well. She promised to visit them at the shelter and help Emily adjust to the new situation. Mark, meanwhile, was held in custody. He was charged with multiple counts of domestic violence and endangerment. The evidence against him, including Jessica's recording and the discovery of the hammer in his car, was substantial. His lawyer tried to downplay the charges, but the police and prosecutors were determined to hold him accountable for his actions. In the days that followed, Jessica received numerous calls from the media. News of the incident had spread, and people were praising her for her courage in intervening. However, Jessica was more concerned about Malene and Emily. She spent her free time gathering essential items for them, such as clothes, toys for Emily, and books to help Malene pass the time at the shelter. The daycare where Jessica worked also became a focal point. The management commended her for her actions and used the incident as an opportunity to strengthen their security and child protection measures. They organized training sessions for all staff on how to recognize signs of child abuse and domestic violence and what steps to take if they suspected something was wrong. As the court date approached, Malene was understandably nervous. She had to face Mark in court and relive the painful memories. Jessica accompanied her to the pre-trial hearings, offering moral support. Emily, too, had to undergo counseling to deal with the trauma she had experienced. The counselors praised her for her bravery in sharing her story. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. Mark pleaded not guilty, but the weight of the evidence was too much for him to overcome. The judge, after listening to all the testimony and reviewing the evidence, found him guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to a significant number of years in prison. After the trial, Malene and Emily started to rebuild their lives. They moved into a new apartment, and Emily began attending a new school. Jessica continued to be a part of their lives, often visiting them and helping Emily with her schoolwork. Malene found a job and slowly regained her confidence. The three of them formed a close bond, and Jessica felt a sense of fulfillment in knowing that she had played a role in helping them find a new beginning. The once tragic situation had led to a new chapter of hope and healing for Malene and Emily, and Jessica was proud to be a part of their journey.